Back to my YouTube channel. So guys, I have a very basic and an amazing announcement for you guys that in this channel I'll be covering one of the famous book for Java Backend Developer. For basically for Java Backend development, that book is Effective Java. You guys might have heard this book before. So this book comprises of almost, I guess, 90 or 100 items. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, 90 items. These 90 items are considered as a must knowledge for any Java backend developer. So these items, you can consider these items as a best practices. So like if you're writing Java code, then what are the best practices and what are the things that you need to consider while writing any Java code? So this is what this book tells us. And in this video series I'll be covering all this 90s item in a 90 lectures video series, and each video will be explaining a particular item in this book. um, so so we are starting from the very first item in this book today, that is item number one. One thing more, that there are some items that may not be very useful for you guys at starting. So I'll be covering those items first, or those chapters first, which are more important for any beginner or for any Java developer. Because although I will specify the item number. So so basically, if someone want to see the particular item provided in this book, then he can go to that particular item. But we going to miss out, I mean, a few of the items from this book. Not miss out, but we're not going to do it in the sequence given in this book. We'll be doing it like like first like all the items present in the chapter 2, then in chapter 3, then in chapter 4. And I mean, I don't know, generics is that important. I know generics is important, but for beginner, for a very beginner who just started, uh, generics would be a as that much as important. I don't think so. So we will be skipping generics for that time, and we'll be covering other, like I'll notify you guys which items I'll be picking, right? So today we are on the very first item, which is item number one. This item, as the heading of this item is consider static factory method instead of constructors. So before that, I'll like to explain you what the static factory method and what you mean by constructor. So I believe that you guys know what classes constructors are, and even you guys would know that what is static factory method. But I'll give you like slight overview about what these are. So in classes, every object gets created by calling a particular function. That function is called constructor. So basically, constructor is a function that create the instance of a class for which for whose object you want to create. Okay, so constructor has some sort of predefined rules that we need to follow to write a constructor. So one of the best thing about the constructor, you might have, or you must have seen while creating classes or while reading any code, that we do not write sometime the constructor of the class, and at that time compiler creates its own default constructor for that class. And whenever we create a new instance of the class, that default constructor gets triggered. That is, we don't write it, that's compiler provided that constructor at runtime. Okay, although we can create our own constructor or parameterized constructor or own constructor for that class, we can do that, right? So there are constructor, and there are some rules bound it. Constructor should have the same name as the class name. uh, if that class is a, let's say, if that class is a base class of some parent class, if that class is extending some other class, then that class, uh, uh, before calling, like if we create, let me show you guys what I mean by what I'm trying to say is that, let's say you have a public class. Let's say that class is a parent class. Okay, I'm not I'm just making it very simple so that you can understand it. This is a parent class, and it has a constructor. Let's say a parent constructor, public parent. uh, I know some of you guys would be thinking why he is explaining such a niche topic, such a subtle topic, uh, by taking that this much time. Reason being is that there are a lot of concepts which are related to this item number one that I'm going to explain with this example. Okay, so be very focused while I'm explaining this example. So this base class is actually extends this parent class. Okay. Okay, so this is the parent class constructor, and let's say I create a public base class constructor as well. Okay, so what happens is, let's say I have a client code. Let's say give it a client name only, public class client, and I have a main function. Okay, public static void main. Okay. um, uh, okay. Okay, this creates, let's say, base class object b. Okay, new base class. Okay, so when it creates an instance of base class, what happens is that this function gets called. Okay, so if I have said, right, um, base class constructor. Okay, and let's say we have a parent class constructor as well, which prints parent class constructor. Okay, so what happens is when this function base class constructor gets called, um, automatically there is a super function which gets solved. Okay, since it's a base class, this is a base class, although name it's also base class, but it's a base class of this class parent. So when this base class constructor gets called, a super function gets called. Super function is nothing but it calls the parent class constructor. Okay, so this is mandatory thing in Java to call the parent class constructor. Okay, and that way parent class constructor will gets called, and then your base class constructor will be called. Okay, but for someone who are from C++ background, they would be saying, hey, if this base class is extending, let's say parent 2, mom and dad, let's say parent mom and parent dad, so whose constructor will be called when we call the super function? So for you guys, for your kind information, you guys, I was also from a C++ background, and I had this question also. But in Java, you do not have multiple inheritance. You are not allowed to do multiple inheritance as you do in C++. You are not allowed in Java. So technically, this super will always, so they're going to be only one parent, and that super will be calling that one and only parent constructor. So yeah, this is the basic idea behind how things go in inheritance, right? So like this is what I'm trying to tell you, what these are base class, and this parent class are nothing but constructor. Now this item says that use static factory method instead of constructor. Now static factory method are uh, the methods which are bound to classes rather than the instances of the class. So what I'm trying to say here is that, let's say I have a function called public test function, right? I'm just giving arbitrary name to the functions, uh, right? Just bear with me in that. So this is a test function. So this test function will be called by the instance of base class. So we created a B instance of base class, so the people can call this test function. Now these are normal function. Okay, now we have another category of function where we okay, test static. Okay, we have another category of function which are static functions. These functions are not bound to, are not called by the instance of the class. These are directly called by the class itself. So rather than typing test static, this is not allowed. This will be a wrong. This will be a wrong. I can call test static directly by saying base class dot test static. Okay. So this is a class function rather than instance function. This is trying to say whatever a static function. Now uh, read carefully. It says static factory method. So why does it say factory? The reason why it say factory, that this let's say I can, let me change this function. Let's say get base class. So let's suppose the static method we have is get base class. The reason why it says factory is that it is a factory of that class. What I mean by factory of that class is that it creates the instance of that class. So constructor usually are the creator of any object, but it says that instead of constructor use static factory method. Okay, you can directly say static method as well, but just to make it more specific that it is creating instances, just creating instances, that's why it said factory. So here you can create a base class object or use a whatever. I'll tell you what other things, other advantages of that is, I should have used B capital, but that's a mistake, camel case mistake basically. Okay, so yeah, this is, it is returning B, it is returning instance of this base class. Okay, you got the point, right? Instead of using a constructor, use static factory method. This is the item one. But what are the advantage, why we doing it, that we're going to see now. The advantage of static, first advantage is that they have names. So uh, so like um, so if you're creating any class, you give it as a noun, right? So if you want to create an instance of this class, you say new noun. So that doesn't sound so good. Instead you can give name like get me a base class, like there's a student class, so you can say get student. You can create a static factory method named get student. So it seems, or in hearing it sounds like you're creating something. So that's why it is more meaningful to use static factory method, because it has names. Constructor are the same name as the class name, so it doesn't provide you that context that you're creating something. Okay. Second thing that we have is uh, uh, okay, you give a well chosen name, that I explained, that it has a name, it has a, you can give name to static factory method, but you cannot customize name for a constructor, because constructor takes names of the class only. Okay, so that's flexibility that you have with the static factory method. Another advantage is that uh, okay, so when you're creating a constructor, every time that constructor gets called, you tend to create, or you automatically creates an object. You cannot have any option whether to create or not to create. If you're calling a constructor, you have to create a constructor, it will get created automatically. But what happens with static factory method, that let's say you want to create a singleton class has only one uh, object in its whole application, whole running, if you're using any class, whole in general, that class creates only one object. So if you're creating that class, then you have to use a static factory method, because you are avoiding, or you are bounding, um, you're controlling the number of instances that gets created for that class. Okay, so in that way, that static factory method can be used. You want to use like 5 instances or 6 instances, so you can create a count of a count instance, and whenever you're creating a count, you can use a cache of the instances, or you can, so that you can use the prior instances that you created. So yeah, that's one advantage of it. uh, the other is that you can able to create instance control class are the one, um, which has fixed number of instances that you can create for that class. Third advantage is that, like constructor, they can return an object of any subtype. So I have an example for that. uh, yeah, so this is an animal class, right, that implements interface animal. Okay, this animal. Okay. uh, so what happens is, when if I have, let's say, a constructor of it, let's say, what I mean by third advantage is that I'm trying to explain the third advantage of having a static factory method. So let's say I have uh, yep, I have this constructor animal. So will return me uh, uh, this will return me instance of animal class, right? But suppose I do not want animal class object, I want interface animal object, and just want to use the functions that are in the interface. So why we want to do this? Because this practice is known as interface based framework, in which we create objects only I mean, we use interfaces only, interface instances. We do not use the object directly of class, so that we do not use extra functions. We just use a bunch of functions that are specific and for that behavior, and that behavior is nothing but an interface. Okay, so for that we can create a static get animal. This is a static factory method. This is an example static factory method, which has an instance. Instance is a private interface variable, which we are assigning an animal class, and then returning an instance. So technically it is returning an instance variable for to us, which has animal reference. Okay, and with that interface variable, we can only call these two functions, run and back. So that is called interface based framework. So it makes us able to return subtype. Yeah, so subtype of the class. Yeah, or let's say we have another class. Let's say that class is public class uh, animal. Okay, dog, which extends animal. Okay, that class extends animal. Okay, we can create a dog. Dog dog d equals to new dog, and that we can return, right? Since it wants us to return the animal type object. Dog is also animal because it extends animal, so it will accept that. So it is saying that only, okay, that you can return subtype of that class, which we are doing here. We are returning a subtype of animal class, right? Next thing that we have is fourth advantage of static factory is that class of the return object can vary from call to call and function. So it more or less the same thing. We can pass a parameter here, like let's say boolean uh, bool, okay, take dog. Okay, so we can specify here, like if take dog is true, right, then we would return the dog, otherwise we would return animal, right? Yeah, in that way, it's like it depend, like we can make a customize, or we can make our function in static method in such a create a such a way that it depends on what parameters we are passing to the function, and with that parameter it takes decision which type of object or subtype it want to return. Fifth advantage is that Okay, we can skip it. It's like more or less the same thing. Main limitation of static factory method is that classes with public or protected constructor cannot be subclass. What I mean by that, let's say we have this animal class. Okay, so when we create a static method, we cannot. I mean, it's obvious that we're going to make the constructor of that class private, because if we don't do it, then there is no point of creating a static method. Why? Let me tell you. So if I have this public animal constructor, or if I don't have it, then it will create a step by default of it. So that's ultimately the same thing. So if I have a public animal, you can consider it as a default created by compiler, and we have a static factory method. Both are public. In that case, any client code. Let's say I have a client code. Okay, public class client. Okay, so if I'm a client, um, and I want to create an animal object. Okay, so I have now two options, right? I can go create animal, like I create animal for normal class, or I can do it by get animal, right? So this way, why we were emphasizing on creating a study factory method, so that we don't have to use this way. So if you are still able to use this way, then what's the point of creating a starting factory method? So in order to use just this function and not giving the client this flexibility to create a method like this, we want this constructor, we change this constructor to private or protected. What happens by creating a private or protected class is that we cannot make a dog class to extend the animal. Why? Because when you create a constructor of dog class, first line it will call the parent class constructor. This super function is nothing but a parent class constructor calling. But when you go, but it extends animal, and it says ki, call the parent class constructor, but we cannot call parent class constructor because it's a private. Yeah, that's the basic idea. Like if you have a private constructor, you cannot extend. But that's also a good thing in another way, because inheritance is said to be there. Set inheritance in software engineering is said that it's a bad practice. Avoid using inheritance if you can use composition. Right? If you have an option to use composition rather than inheritance. Composition. Okay. Um, okay. This we have covered. Second shortcoming is that. They're hard for programmers to find. So this is a little bit of technical thing. It says that when you create a API documentation, the constructor gets noted, but study factory method doesn't get noted. So that's I mean, in future it may happen that the study factory method will have this facility to get notified in API documentation, but for now we don't have that. But it's a more or less not a design problem. It's a different thing. Okay, you can. These are some of the list of the name that you can give to your static factory method: from, of, value of, instance or get instance. Okay, create, new instance. So these are giving us some information. These are giving some, some kind of a feel that we are creating something. Okay, that's why a constructor do not give this, right? That's why it's one of, like, I explained this as one of the advantage as well, that it with the study factory method we can give a better name to it. Okay, so yeah, we have covered the item number one. Hope you liked it. We're soon going to cover, or we I'm thinking of creating a whole series based on this, because I'm also reading this book, and it's better to share this information with you guys also. And it was like you guys will also, will get this knowledge. And yeah, so hope you like the item number one. Hope you use it in your daily practice while writing the code, or hope you know use it somewhere. And you can thank me in the comments if you use, or get any new information about anything. So yeah, that's all from this video, and please do like and subscribe and share if you like the content. I'll be uploading soon more and more content like this, and stay tuned if you wanted to see these kinds of contents.